With over 400 celebrity interviews and tons of pop culture nerdiness, Too Opinionated is a safe haven for your inner geek. Find us at meistercon.com or on YouTube under MeisterCon Pod. And please subscribe. It would really help us out. Thanks, everybody. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Too Opinionated. So excited today. I've got entrepreneur and author Neil Seeman with me. So welcome, Neil.
Thank you very much, Michael. Great pleasure to be with you today.
Yeah, we were talking, we were having a pretty good conversation offline, and we're kind of like, well, maybe we should record some of this.
Right. I was thinking, hey, we're already onto the content. We were talking about what makes us tick. You being an entrepreneur, me, and our origin stories. I love origin stories.
It's interesting that entrepreneurship can take so many different forms. I mean, it can be anything. You know, if you're out there and you're interested in something and you turn it in to something that's profitable or successful, that's kind of entrepreneurship right there.
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. Actually, so a big part of my message. You should be doing my publicity. There's a message of my book, Accelerated Minds, right? I mean, I'm trying to reclaim that word entrepreneurship. Too often these days we associated with, these tech kids and Silicon Valley, building generative AI systems. But heck, podcasters, authors, you name it. The creative arts, so many of us are doing entrepreneurial things. But those kind of entrepreneurial things are not as discussed.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, so Neil, we have to talk about the new book, but let's start with an introduction. Talk a little bit about yourself and tell us what got you started in business and what it is you do.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I mean, I guess best way of describing me is I'm a mutt. Like I don't own a dog. I've become the pandemic's warmed me to dogs, but I use that expression mutt. I'm interested in a lot of things, too many things. And that's driven me to serial entrepreneurship, both non-profit and for-profit, everything around the internet. I was always interested, really starting in the mid-90s, around how the internet could sort of improve healthcare, how the internet could improve the delivery of information. And so really that's been my focus. And so the last company I started, it's called Rewe, big data company, analytics, collecting opinion data in every country in the world, including countries that are heavily monitored like Ethiopia and the People's Republic of China. And at the time, people called it disruptive. I prefer the word. I prefer the word fix to disrupt.
Right. But I know disruptive. That's kind of a negative word.
Yeah. Disruptive is cool for a while, but now that everything's disruptive,
right? We can't all be disruptive. It'd be just chaos.
And then my latest entrepreneurial venture actually was my book. Writing a book is the quintessential entrepreneurial journey. I mean, it's. So, and I'm writing a book about entrepreneurship. So, that just came out recently, and that's been a journey as well.
Yeah, and it's I think it's really interesting because you're actually looking at entrepreneurship as a possible addiction. People get addicted to that thrill of starting something new or trying to make these big ideas happen. And that can be a negative as well as a positive.
Yeah, you bet, Michael. I mean, it's like entrepreneurship is the force for prosperity in the West and around the world, and we need it to survive, to thrive. And we all depend on the mental health of entrepreneurs and founders, right? But at the end of the day, if you don't manage that chemical in your brain that my parents studied all their lives, dopamine, if you don't manage it properly, if you don't manage the speed, the quick fire release of that dopamine carefully, you can slide into addiction, the addictive curse. You can also succumb to any whole range of mental health demons. But if you can manage it well, you can build prosperity for yourself, for your community, family, and the world.
I had an actor on a month or two ago, and he was pretty open about the fact that he was in recovery. You know, he had some addictions. He was in recovery, and it was kind of that thing. He was just kind of chasing that feeling. And what he ended up doing was he started fishing, like deep sea fishing. But there's a little bit of danger there. He's kind of chasing after some dangerous fish, but it gave him that feeling that he used to get from a drug. So he's got that feeling, but he's off of the drugs. And yes, what he's doing is a little bit dangerous, but he's taking the precautions to do it. So he's kind of focusing that energy in a more positive way.
That's beautiful. You see, I mean, the thing about that particular solution, the fishing solution, which still gives you that risk, that dopaminergic high, that's the
Yeah.
phrase that scientists use, is it helps slow you down. So much of what trips entrepreneurs up is we move too fast, right? That's why I called the book Accelerated Minds, right? So we're just like moving too fast. So if you can do something to slow yourself down, and that's a hey, I really quite like that. It's kind of inspiring me to try that out myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So the book is Accelerated Minds, People Who Risk It All on Big Ideas. So it kind of gives it away in the title what the book's about. But I think it's really fascinating because when you start a new venture, big or small, you have highs and you have lows. You're going to run into obstacles, whatever you do. And a lot of times, if you don't manage it right, those kind of defeat you, which can send you into a spiral. So, do you talk about that in the book about, how to avoid those pitfalls, or at least how to navigate them when you run into them?
Yeah, absolutely. There's this expression Ben Horowitz talks about. Entrepreneurship is high highs and low lows twice in one day, right? So it's the twice in one day that really that nails it, right? So yeah, I talk about it. I call it neuromodulation. So it's a scientific word for just saying, okay, put your brain at ease. So what I explain in the book is that we know through a variety of things, including the placebo effect, that we can actually change our brain. We can slow it down, and there's things we can do. And when we understand entrepreneurs for the accelerated minds that they are, and so I showcase all the evidence, all the research that shows that entrepreneurs have various forms of risk. We know that there's a whole range of natural tools that can work at an individual level. Slowing yourself down, anything from, I talk about ice baths. I talk about even what George Costanza does in Seinfeld, doing the opposite.
Right.
Sometimes doing the opposite of what you're inclined to do. That's actually a very effective mechanism of neuromodulation. Laughter, 15 minutes a day of laughter, forced laughter, like literally
Yeah.
you and I just laughing like this, like it trains the brain.
Right.
So it retrains the brain. But those are hacks, right? And they're important. I don't want to suggest they're not important, but beyond that, I talk a lot about having a real group of close people around you who know your true self as an individual, so that when you're sort of falling off that direction, or that path, they can just put you right, and they know what your values are.
Yeah, I like that because it's so important to have that support system. We were talking offline about the podcast, and the fact it's the majority of the time it's just me and my son doing it. We don't really have a team, but we do have a very supportive family that's willing to step in and help whenever we run into a situation with that. And I think that's so important. You don't have to necessarily have somebody that's actively helping you, but they're
Yeah.
supporting you.
Yeah, no, I mean, mentorship's important. I mean,
Yeah.
entrepreneurship is lonely, no matter how big, how small your company is,
Yeah.
right? So, you can be a CEO founder of a company, 10,000 people, and be really lonely if
Sure.
you don't have a partner or support system, right? Like I talk about how, one of the problems with entrepreneurship these days in the culture is we talk about it as this one person superhero, right? But the reality is, it's always, when it works, it's always more than one person. And you need to have that team, and that team can just be one person
Yeah.
that you share everything with, and or could be a co-founder, could be a mentor.
Serves as a check too.
Yeah,
If you go off the path a little bit, then you can kind of draw each other back. It's difficult to do that if you're a team of one.
yeah, and I have great respect for teams of one, and teams of one are growing around the world, right? Like, and that's a part of what I explore in the book. Entrepreneurship is on a tear across North America. Here in Canada, where I am, we're actually giving you Americans a run for your money in terms of entrepreneurship,
I
right?
mean, do you
Um,
think that that's because of like the internet and social media? Is that why we're running into that, or is it a result of things we went through, in 2020 with the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, what the pandemic proved is that, independent of really brutal times in our midst, entrepreneurialism is always on a tear. Humans are resilient, and that's the entrepreneurship coda, right? Optimism in the face of hardship. That being said, I do believe that the value and awe in which we hold entrepreneurs has never been higher right now.
Right.
And sometimes that may not be so healthy. So in my book, I do talk, for example, and I talk publicly about how a lot of young people today, they feel compelled to do something entrepreneurial because they see all their friends talking about it on social media. So they'll have a full time gig, and then they'll have one, two, three side hustles.
Yeah.
And then when that side hustle isn't working out, magically, wonderfully, the way that, everyone sort of self broadcasts on social media, they'll start to feel down. So a big part of my work is talking about the cold, hard reality of entrepreneurship, which is not necessarily about success, but it's predominantly about failure, and how do you manage failure when and if it happens.
See, I love that. I know in our case, we went into it. I was telling you, we just wanted to spend time together and talk about things that interested us, or that we kind of geeked out about. That was how we started, and we never had that mindset at the beginning that we wanted to turn this into something. It was just a very small, narrow mindset, but it grew over time. And then once we kind of saw the potential of it, then we leaned into it and got it to where it's at now. And I still think that we've got room to grow, but you kind of do that in steps. But I think we avoided some of those pitfalls because we didn't have those lofty expectations at the beginning, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I talk about the difference between values-driven entrepreneurs, and you sound like one based on how you've described it, who are trying to build something for themselves, for their community that they care about most, something of lasting value, versus those who start off on a path just wanting to accumulate riches. Now, the benefit of that second group that I just talked about is they don't take their hardships personally, right?
Yeah.
The and so, like, they're lucky in a weird way. The people who are values based, trying to do something meaningful for their community, for themselves and their family, they tend, and the science suggests this, as I show in my book, they tend to be people who take failure personally and to blame themselves when things go wrong. And that's what I'm trying to change in the entrepreneurial community. I'm trying to encourage people to talk about that and to stop blaming themselves, seeing things a little more big picture, rationally, as they deal with these challenges.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have do you have tells that your circle around you will recognize if you're going off the path a little bit, or if maybe you're not as focused as you normally are? Do you have certain things that kind of give that away?
Yeah, I think it's different for each person
Sure.
in that little community. I have a friend of mine. He lives in Jerusalem. He was visiting me um, a number of years ago, and we had a business conversation, and he then looked at me and he said, Neil, you know, you've got to change your life, and eat better, or you're going to die. And he said it like with such conviction that that you know,
Be a shock.
right, he kind of knew that little piece of me. He knew that small piece of me, which was my eating habits, so he could tell that I was not that unhealthy eating, right? And then there's other, so different people have a different slice and insight into your personality within that close group of friends, right?
Yeah.
And protectors. That's what I call it. It's like almost like I don't know if you remember, like if you studied ancient warfare, I was always really intrigued by the Greek phalanx. That was
Yeah.
the way they would move through the battle with their gear on as a group, as a huddle. And that's the way I feel entrepreneurship is often about, right? Because you're getting slings and arrows from all sorts of folks, from investors, from the public, from the media, but the only people you can really trust are the people in your phalanx.
See, I really love that, because it's true. When you start out, 90% of what you're getting feedback wise is negative.
And sometimes that negative feedback is given for the strangest of reasons, right?
Mhm.
Like I know, in like household name successful entrepreneurs who were told early on, hey, you're not a natural, there's no way you're going to make this work. And they were told that by people in their family, and they were told that because their family members loved them. They were worried about them. They
Sure.
wanted to take, like, hey,
Yeah, they had good intentions.
Good intentions, yeah, hey, take the safer path, right? But if we were to listen, if entrepreneurs were to listen to the wisdom from those around us who hold us back, hey man, I mean, nothing would get done. We probably wouldn't even be having this conversation.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Commercial web.
Yeah.
I mean, I was back there in the mid '90s. I mean, the risks people took were, I mean, they were different than today, but they were pretty wild.
Yeah. 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 When you look at what it took to get the internet up and running with that, I mean, when that first started, no, yeah, I remember those days. None of us thought anything about that. We're like, yeah, that's not going to work. You're not going to be able to look anything up on the internet, and that's not going.
I was the first person in my university to use I remember to get I accessed the library through a modem. And my roommates thought I was, I mean, look, I was a self-professed geek. That's no issue there, but they just thought it was so useless. I mean, well, you got to go to the physical library. I mean, well, what the hell? Why do you got to meet people? It's a social experience. Why on earth would you want to get a little summary, and whatever? And so, yeah, I mean, everyone was kind of a bit crazy, and crazy is good. Again, as long as it's managed.
Yeah. Yeah, you wrote a book, kind of like about the kind of the weight loss journey. Is that right?
I did, yeah. That was more of an academic book. It got some attention though, that one, because it was right around the time Michelle Obama, First Lady, had been talking about childhood obesity,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I basically looked at that topic through, it was called XXL, Obesity and the Limits of Shame, looked at that topic through a mental health perspective. So I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an author, but I'm also a mental health advocate. And all I really mean by that is that I like to see mental health and physical health being looked at through the same lens, and I like data informed analysis of these topics, right? And so that's what I do in this current book, and that's what I did in that last book as well.
Yeah, I think that book is very interesting too. West Virginia, we're a poorer state, and our health tends to be poor. So you have a lot of people struggling with their weight. I don't mean we all struggle with a little bit of extra weight here and there, but I mean that really struggle with their weight to the point that they feel kind of hopeless. So I think that's really interesting to kind of dive into that and look at ways to come out of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're the first person who's pointed out like the similarity between the two books. And one similarity is that in both books, okay, I talk about the problem with public messaging, right? So in the first book on obesity, look, I wasn't the first to point this out, but I just talk about how a lot of these messages, hey, just lose weight, lose weight, lose weight, and sort of shaming messages, they
Right.
actually can have the opposite effect, right? And then in this current book, I talk about in Accelerated Minds, I talk about how these messages to young people about entrepreneurship, which are kind of things like, hey, this is a glorified experience, and hey, rah, rah, you got to raise a ton of money from venture capital, and your life will be set. And I just talk about how that's misleading on multiple levels. And we need to change that messaging. I really do believe that the way we message about the reality of entrepreneurship is really important for people to understand, because it's a journey. It's not the same as a traditional career path.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. My son does the podcast with me. He was a high school football player and got a severe concussion. He played on the offensive line, so he was encouraged to be big,
Yeah.
strong, muscular. Well, he got a really bad concussion.
Oh man.
Basically, had to take a year off from school to recover, but he wasn't able to do anything in that time. So all that muscle just turned to fat, and he got big. He got really big. So that people were trying to help him out, but all it was doing really was discouraging him. They had good intentions, but he wasn't taking the message correct until he kind of changed his mindset, and he made a list of things that he wanted to accomplish. And that was on one of the lists, was to get back into shape. And he did. He dropped 130 pounds on his own, just work, because he couldn't, he was by himself for so long because he couldn't stand light or even interaction. So he's just working on his own. But that drive, I think, led him to, creating the podcast. He's a librarian during the day. So he's kind of living his dream that way, working with kids. And I think that's the type of thing that entrepreneurs, they tend to have. They have that kind of that internal spark that drives them, even in the face of kind of negativity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, so we talk about addiction, and addiction is a terrible thing. It ruins families, ruins
Yes.
lives. But at the same time, there is part of our system as humans that's behaviorally adaptive, and in entrepreneurs that can manifest itself, yes, in addiction, but it can also manifest itself, if carefully managed, in resilience and tenacity. And I love that story about, it's a very challenging story with your son. I also played on the offensive line, by the way, in
Oh
high
yeah.
school. But tell you what, it was a different era back then.
Yeah.
But I remember like it was yesterday. And but the point about what your son did is it reminds me of another neuromodulation technique entrepreneurs use, which is just writing stuff down. You write stuff down, and that baby steps, and sometimes you write down, okay, what's the worst thing that can come from it, and then you journal about that. So journaling can be a very effective tool.
It's
Again,
amazing how well journaling can help
I
just with your
agree.
mindset.
I completely agree. Yeah, I think writing. I'm reading Natalie Goldberg's book. I don't know if you ever read it, Writing the
Oh,
Bones. Have you
no,
read
I
that?
haven't read that, but yeah, I've heard of it. I haven't read that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I apparently in America, in some classes, it was a kind of required creative writing book.
Yeah.
But I'm rereading it now, and I kind of think it's just so inspirational about how you write and what happens when you write in the journaling fashion. And sometimes it's about connecting with your true self. It's almost spiritual in a way, that book.
Right. Yeah, I could totally see that. Because I think that's so important to you need to get in touch with yourself, to make sure that whatever it is you're passionate about, that's, the correct path. Because sometimes you can be passionate about something, but maybe the idea is just not that great. And you have to be able to recognize that and find something that you can do that can be successful.
Oh, I mean, absolutely, and entrepreneurs too. I mean, are I mean, like a lot of people talk about entrepreneurs as risk takers. There's no doubt they're risk takers, but another element of their character trait is to actually try as best as they can to control risks. And they do that through trying to be eminently logical in every step of the chain of the problem they're trying to solve, which is why I love entrepreneurs and always will. But at the same time, we just got to take care of ourselves a little bit better.
Yeah. So for the book, did you study like some highly successful entrepreneurs to kind of get the insight into that mindset?
Yeah. So what I was the first to do is just twin the brain science with the research into entrepreneurs. So my late father, he passed away in 2021. He was a famous brain scientist, discovered
Really?
how the dopamine receptors in the brain work with drugs for mental illness, and then I looked at the entrepreneurial research, right? So and the entrepreneurial research, it doesn't really make this, and I'm glad it doesn't actually. It doesn't make distinguishments between like the successful entrepreneurs and unsuccessful entrepreneurs because, in a weird way, like in a weird way, success, as you know, as an entrepreneur, is commercial success. It's really about how you define it, and it's often not based on some sort of commercial metrics. So but yeah, no, look, there's an examination of a whole range of different type of entrepreneurs I look at. Entrepreneurs of faith, I'm very interested in that.
Yeah.
Faith tends to be a solace that can be very effective for entrepreneurs, and there's reasons for that. I do look at entrepreneurs in different countries and some of the challenges that they face, and they're quite consistent across countries and over time. Oftentimes, they take a rational financial risk. At the end of the day, I believe that in my own definition of success, I believe what separates successful from an unsuccessful entrepreneur, putting aside their bank account, their net worth, is simply their ability to step outside themselves, right? Because that's why we build what we're trying to build, right? So if you're too much in yourself, no matter how large your war chest is, you're not successful. You got to step outside yourself, and that's an ability that some people can leverage through faith, other people through philosophic consolation, others through journaling that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and my son, I told you, he made that list, but he's a writer and he writes every day. Sometimes he's just making lists. Sometimes he's writing a story, sometimes
Right.
it's just random thoughts, but he writes every day, and that kind of keeps him focused. He's big on everything has a place. So he's got tons of lists that he's always looking at. And I'm assuming he kind of gets that from me. I'm very statistical. I always loved statistics. I was a baseball fan.
Did you write lists yourself?
I did back in the day. I was a collector. I
Okay.
collected comic books and all kinds of stuff. And
Yeah.
I would always be writing lists, organizing. I tend to try to organize everything so that it's better for me. It may not be better for anybody else, but for me. And I'm assuming that's part of the reason he does the things he does. He doesn't do exactly what I tend to do, but he's got his own thing, but they're similar. We tried, like, as the podcast became more successful, we started looking kind of accidentally for ways to expand a little bit. We started in a bedroom. We wanted to find a studio to put our podcast in, and we found a building that came with renters. So we kind of accidentally got into the landlord business. And then now we've just been expanding that, and we've made a ton of mistakes. We tried the fixing up places to resell, and we got burnt, by contractors. And you learn as you go. But as we've gotten better at, we've tried to manage those risks, and we've kind of fine-tuned places that we're looking for, certain type of places that we're looking for that kind of fit our model. And that's kind of been a way we've expanded, into a way that I never would have thought of. Yeah, I never would have thought we would have went into real estate from a podcast, but that's kind of how it's happened.
Oh, that's beautiful. It's a beautiful story, right? Like people don't, I mean, you know how it is in the business schools and the business journals, they don't talk about the reality of accidental entrepreneurship and experimentation, which is really what it is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a science to little pieces of it, but at the end of the day, I mean, so much of it is a random path of curiosity and experimentation. So that's it. Hey, that's a great story. I love it.
You know, I always hear people talking about you need to say yes. Just say yes. You know, it opens up all these possibilities. And that's true. But we found you also need to know when to say no because
Oh,
not
good.
everything that comes across your plate is a good idea. You know, you got to be able to say no. And I think people get in trouble sometimes because they go with that yes mindset, which isn't bad on the surface. But if you're saying yes to everything, you're going to have some clunkers in there.
Oh, no, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm very much aware of my own proclivity to say yes too often.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, you don't want to be that ideas guy or gal
Right.
that's always coming up with a new idea, and then you're kind of like, oh, every your colleagues, your employees are wondering, wait a second, what happened? What happened to that other idea?
Right.
I thought that was important. So yeah, no, that is a definitely a challenge. But that being said, you know, um, for some people, it's a good message. I think it's a good message to send for some people who really hesitant. I'm sure you've met them over the years. People who have always wanted to do something
Yeah.
entrepreneurial, and then you meet them 15 years later, and they're still in the same place, and
Yeah. They've never taken the leap.
they never took the leap. Like it's like it's funny because a lot of people say that it's difficult to understand the real quirkiness of entrepreneurs, and let's
Yeah.
face it, we are oddball. Like I'm totally happy saying that I'm neurotic or what the scientists call like neurotypic and all that stuff, but actually oftentimes it's very hard for me to understand you know, like your very traditional career path. You know, I was trained as a lawyer, but goodness sake, I never wanted to pursue. You know, that was just you know that was scary for me, right? I genuinely don't understand that species type, right? When you do, you know, some people really need to be pulled along, and to the extent I can help them, I like to try.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a really good point because a lot of people, they're just scared to try. They may have a really good idea, really good plan, but just can't pull the trigger on it. So if you can help some of those people get over that hump, because once you get over that hump and you try it, whether it works out or not, chances are you're going to try again.
Yeah, it's funny. It's almost. I mean, I use this analogy. I did amateur boxing when I was
Oh,
younger. Now,
nice.
I do not recommend this sport, but it's kind of like stepping into the ring, right? So there's a lot of people who not only think about it and talk about it, but come really, really close. They don't step in the ring. They're like, hey, they'll file for a patent. They'll build their business plan. They'll talk to investors. They'll tell their friends, but they just don't step into the ring. And it's only when you step into the ring where everything changes. You know what it's like. Like it's a completely different experience. You learn that some things, hey, you're terrible at. And then you learn that there's maybe one or two things you're like better than average at.
Yeah.
So let's go for that one, right? Anyway, so it's weird. I'm not. It's funny. I use all these sports analogies all the time, but even though I don't play them anymore, but they can be very valuable
Sure.
to explaining things.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you were writing the book, did you run into anything that surprised you? Any realizations that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, I mean, many. I think the biggest surprise, well, one was I just had so much to say about this topic. Like, I mean, so I'd come down every day, and I just like put a new post-it down, or I'd jot some new notes down. It would keep me awake at night because I'd read something and I'd say, oh, I got to pack that in. And then what I had to do is I had to de-weed everything. I had to get it, because it was really important for me for this book to be a book for the general audience reader, right? And so I had to de-weed, like simplify, simplify, simplify. I didn't realize I had so much to say, and then I didn't realize how hard it was going to be to just kind of simplify it all down. And that's so far served me well. It's been noted as the next big idea club must read for this year, and it's getting some traction and attention. And so that's very satisfying to me, that I'm able to talk about it with people, because talking about it is really important. So the surprise was just, hey, how much that I had to say about it, and how much that I needed to just strip apart to get to the bones of what I meant to say.
Yeah. Any advice for someone that has went all in on something and it didn't work out, and now they're scared to try again?
I think we've got to normalize failure and
I agree with that.
lean into failure, right? I mean, and you only hear about success, right? Like, it's weird, like, you know how the media are these days. They only tell stories about like outrageously successful entrepreneurs, or crooks on the other side, right? The vast majority of entrepreneurs have, anyway, actually, I think 100%, maybe -1 of the entrepreneurs I know have really failed, like, flatly on like a majority of their projects, right? Like, depending on. So I think one piece of advice is just learning the statistics. Like, look at the data, like, it is out there, like, so that gives you some heartening sense that you're not alone. And then beyond that, like, I think it is, to your point earlier, I think it's really important. I mean, entrepreneurs are inherently, they're not brash people. Like, we see this thing, they're actually typically quiet, socially awkward people.
Yeah.
And they're like, kind of like Susan Cain talks about, like, not introverts necessarily, but often socially awkward, shy. And so the ability to actually be inquisitive about what went wrong, and be objective, and not, like, let's take yourself out of it. Let's assume, as I said, a lot of entrepreneurs, they blame themselves for the failure. Let's just take that option off the table and identify and list all the potential reasons, including randomness, chance, timing, etc., that things kind of skidded off. And then think about this, like, another way of doing it. Like, what could you do to improve, and work on something you love, something you're good at, and something that will benefit the constituency that you care about most in your community.
Do you think, we talked a little bit about 2020 and the effect that it has had over the last couple of years? Do you think that part of the issue, because we hear a lot that people are having difficulties finding workers, people just, especially the, kind of the service industry. I mean, do you think part of that problem is that people are realizing, hey, I don't want to just work the same job every day for whatever I'm doing. I've got these ideas I want to try. And that time period has spurred some people to actually get out there and give things a shot outside of just their normal, whatever it is, 9 to 5 job.
Absolutely, Michael. I mean, what we know about entrepreneurship having, taken off in the last few years is it's largely attributable to people, young people, older people too. It's cross generational. They want to have more control over their lives, like over their outcome, right? And again, I get back to this idea that most people sort of cartoon entrepreneurs as, crazy risk takers. Well, the reality is that, yeah, we like to manage risk. So that ability to kind of manage risk and question, and again, do something. An entrepreneur wants to build something of value for themselves, their community that they care most about. That's my definition, and something of lasting value. And so they question, well, to what extent can I do that by working for, what my grandfather's generation used to call Yemen, right, or the man, right, or the woman, and versus like doing it on my own with the people I love and the people around me. So that is motivating people around the world, unquestionably. I definitely think technical things like virtual and remote work has made it a little bit easier. But yeah, I think the labor shortage. I like to put that in quotes because I don't think we fully understand yet what's happening in the labor economy and why people are just quote unquote not there in certain professions. But part of it, I do believe, is because they're motivated by that desire, that will to create.
I mean, if you're in a situation where you're working full time, but you're struggling, or your family is struggling, and you're just killing yourself, which I think happens a lot, um, what's the harm in trying something on your own to see if you can improve your situation? Because chances are, especially in those service industry jobs, you can walk right back in there and pick up where you left off if it doesn't
Yeah,
work out.
yeah, absolutely. Service industry, the trades, those that make for amazing entrepreneurs. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that really frustrates me so much about the financial and tech media is they hold up as representations of entrepreneurship. People who are playing around with the internet and doing, codes and stuff. But look, the trades are it's incredible. Like, and the speed, the path to growing a nice, beautiful company is great. And you're right, you can de-risk it. So I do think that that's what's going on. I mean, and to your point about working hard and not making ends meet, it's tough, right? We just had a mayoral race in our city in Toronto.
Yeah.
Um, and there was one, statistic that was being bandied about. I don't know if I have the exact number correct, but it was something in the order of 75%, certainly a significant majority of people using food banks in the city. They're holding down full-time jobs, right?
Kind of
What's
scary.
Yeah, it is, right? Like what's going on, and the demand on food banks is growing at a really rapid pace, and so it's kind of like, yeah, you've got to look at how you can support yourself and your community and build meaning in your life. And if that's not working in a company, or if you're not able to be what I call an intrapreneur within that company, then yeah, absolutely go for it. That's what people are saying to themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Completely agree with that. Well, Neil, so the book is Accelerated Minds, People Who Risk It All on Big Ideas. I've ordered my copy. So
Thank
let's
you.
talk a little bit about that before we wrap up. Where can they find the book? Where can they get the book?
So thank you, Michael. Thank God they can actually find it pretty much anywhere online in this new world. Online bookstores, physical bookstores, so in America, Barnes and Noble and all its equivalents. But yeah, I mean, online everywhere, Amazon, Google my name. Google, you can go to my website, neilseeman.com, where actually we have a lot of endorsements from scientists, entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
famous entrepreneurs and others about the importance of the message in the book. Or directly from the publisher, Sutherland House Books. You can publish it from get it from there. But anywhere around the world, you can access this book. It's a global book.
Yeah, I love that. I plan to read it and then pass it to my son to
Thank you. Yeah,
read.
yeah, I'd love to hear his opinion on this. It sounds like he's the ideal audience. In fact, one of the things that surprised me, asked about surprises. One of the things that surprised me about this book is that the people most interested in this topic are young people. Like they're like in that kind of like 16 to 30 group.
Right.
And I have a bunch of theories on that. Um, Around why that is. But I basically have two theories. One is that yeah, there's a passion for entrepreneurialism among this group like never before seen in my history anyway. And then secondly, I think they're much more conversant than my generation was in mental health issues. So they're
Yeah.
able to kind of like talk about it, understand
It
it.
doesn't have the stigma that it used to have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that's been a really interesting and rewarding discovery in that book. I've been speaking at high schools and stuff. So yeah, it's interesting.
What's next, Neil? Is do you plan to write another book? Or are you staying along these same lines, or are you trying something different?
So yeah, I'm always writing. Once a writer, always writing. So I am writing another book with a business theme. You'll be happy to know there's a hero villain element to it. Beyond that, I'm always kicking around startup ideas and kicking around with really fascinating people in different university departments here at the University of Toronto, where I'm at. So yeah, I just like working with smart, creative people
Yeah,
of different varieties. As
yeah,
I
it's
said,
inspiring.
I'm a mutt. That's what I am.
Yeah, I may steal that. I love that.
I don't know. I stole it from somebody else, and I actually don't know who originally came up with the idea. But yeah, yeah. I mean, the thing about mutts is that we're also attracted to. I don't. Are you a dog owner? Do you know
No, my
dogs?
son is though. He
Oh
absolutely
well, he
loves
would
dogs.
know because the thing is it like I find mutts are attracted to other mutts. Like
Yeah.
it's like a weird thing. We're like self-organizing communities.
We know our own.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a real pleasure to speak with you, Michael.
Yeah, this has been great, Neil. You'll have to come back when the next book's ready. Let's
You
do it
bet.
again.
You bet, Michael. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. I think we touched on this. You mentioned the website. Are you on social media anywhere else that we can find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I do have a Twitter handle. It's just my name, Neil Seeman. I actually went off Twitter because of the toxicity of Twitter. I
Sure.
was an early power user of Twitter. Then I went off, and then I rejoined Twitter because I started a book, but I didn't have my followers from so now I got like half my followers are robots. I'm not,
I know. It can be very frustrating. You just got to keep plugging away at it.
right. But I'm on LinkedIn, and of course you can find the publisher Sutherland House Books is everywhere on different social media.
Yeah. Well, Neil, this has been a real pleasure, and definitely let's plan to do it again because it's been a great conversation.
Thank you, Michael. I enjoyed it and I learned a lot too. Really, congratulations on your entrepreneurship. It's just a fascinating industry.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, hold on one second. That was a lot of fun for me, Neil Seeman. Um, we really enjoy having creative people on the podcast. Normally, that's in the entertainment business or the music business, but we have a lot of authors, and I think Neil's book is really interesting and unique because I love the way he's kind of dissecting that entrepreneurial mindset, good and bad, and kind of dives into that using statistics. I'm a statistical guy, so I love that. Our story, and I've told this on the podcast a few times, but I was a comic book store owner. I was a collector. I built my collection up to the point that I was able to open a store, and then I opened another one. And it was the best. I absolutely loved it. But then Marvel went bankrupt in 96. And even though the stores were doing pretty well, I got scared and closed them because I thought the bottom's dropping out. And I've always regretted that. I've always regretted that. So I've always kind of kept, that open mind for an opportunity to come back in. And in the meantime, I spent 20 years running call centers. Hated every minute of it. I met some wonderful people, and I'm still close friends with a lot of them, but never really enjoyed that type of work. And I think it really held me back, and kind of as an introvert, it caused me to become a worse introvert, if that makes sense. So then when Brett came up with this idea for the podcast, I never had an idea that it was going to lead to anything other than us spending time together. But I was open for it. So when the opportunity came, and for us, what really launched the podcast was 2020. Everybody's stuck at home. They didn't have anything to do. So when we really leaned into getting guests for the podcast, we had the best time in 2020 doing that. I give it up if we could have skipped all the pain and the pandemic, but we were able to take advantage of that, even though initially it was kind of accidental. But once we leaned into it, the podcast took off. So that book from Neil, Accelerated Minds, really spoke to me. So hopefully some of you have similar stories, and maybe Neil can help you out, or maybe just help you understand, what's going on in your own head. That's I think very valuable as well. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today we put out episode 607. Very proud of that. 4.5 years in, tons of good material on there. Please check that out. You can find all of them, audio and video, on our website, meistercon.com. We would really appreciate that. We're trying really hard to grow our YouTube channel. It's MeisterCon Pod. If you'd like to support us, just go there and subscribe. It's free. Just hit that subscribe button. You'll get access to all of our videos, 607 of them, plus tons of clips. If you're not up for an hour episode, maybe a 3-minute clip might be your thing. Those are on there as well. Thank you guys so much. Until next time. Bye, everybody. Hi, everybody. I'm once again here to ask for your support. It's been a big year for the Too Opinionated podcast. Back in February, we got to live out a dream, moderate for William Shatner here in our hometown. In May, we passed 100,000 downloads on our YouTube channel, and we followed that up in June with 50,000 downloads on the audio side. We recently posted our 600th episode, which is pretty good volume for just a father and son operation. Not too many podcasts can keep that volume up. We've been doing this now for 4.5 years, 600 plus episodes. We recently hit 1,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel, which is a really big deal for us because we've always gotten the views, but have struggled to get people to subscribe. So that 1,000 was a big deal for us. And best of all, we were recently named one of the top podcasts on IMDb, which is the entertainment database. Those that are ahead of us, we came in at number 82. Those that are ahead of us are bigger companies like Disney, mostly Marvel, and Joe Rogan, that type of podcast. So for us, being just a small West Virginia father and son podcast, to be in the top 100 out of 15 million, it's a pretty big deal for us. So thank you for everything you've done for us so far. Got a couple little ways, though, that you can help us, and they're free and they're really easy. If you haven't checked out our YouTube channel yet, please go to YouTube. It's under MeisterCon Pod. Just hit subscribe. It's free. Doesn't cost you anything. Really helps us a ton. And maybe even more important, if you could go to IMDb, imdb.com, look up the Too Opinionated podcast, and just look around the page. Just having that traffic on the page really helps us out. So that's a couple easy ways that you can support us, even if you're not listening or watching all of the time. And we want you to listen and watch, because I think that our guest list, I would put up against anybody, any other show, podcast, anybody out there. I think our guest list holds up. So please check us out. You probably will find somebody that you like, or maybe somebody that you didn't know you liked, but kind of discovered them on there. There's tons of that. If you're into music, we have that too. If you like books, we've got authors on there. If you're more into what goes on behind the scenes in the entertainment world, we've got producers, directors, video artists, anything you can think of that happens behind the scenes, we've had them on the show. So definitely check us out. Thank you guys so much. Until next time. Bye, everybody.